It's time to take a new approach to finding true fulfillment in your career, health, and state of mind through insightful conversations with those who have found their professional and personal passions while achieving balance. Whether it's entrepreneurs, athletes, or healthcare professionals, we bring you real people, real growth right here on the Boost Podcast. Now, here's your host, Elena Lipson.
Hey Boost Squad, welcome to episode 4. Elena Lipson here, and we are thrilled to have our guest today, Mike Szabo, join us. Mike, are you ready to join the Boost Squad?
Let's do it.
Great. So Mike is an award-winning landscape architect, and he has nearly 20 years of experience, and he's also the founder of SZABO Landscape Architecture. He got his start in this field in college when he was at the Colorado State University working on the grounds crew for golf courses in the local Parks and Recreation division. Then in 2002, he moved to San Diego where he worked at 2 renowned landscape design firms. And since then, he's worked on a number of different projects, pretty much in every area you could imagine in the field, ranging from corporate and educational campuses to neighborhood parks, to hotel and resort renovations, retail centers, public works projects, and residential garden design. It sounds like he has done it all. Around Christmas time in 2013, Mike moved his family to Bend, Oregon. Then on January 1st, 2014, Mike opened the doors to his own business, SZABO Landscape Architecture. So Mike, fill in any gaps in my intro and tell us a little bit about your personal life.
Well, a little bit about me. I am married with 2 kids, and I'm 37 years old. We moved up to Bend, Oregon, which is a small town, and so it's been a big change from growing up in the D.C. area and then moving and living in San Diego, the metropolis of San Diego, for 12 years. So it's been a big change for me and my family, but it was the change that we wanted.
Good stuff. And I think we'll hear a little bit more about what that change was like when we learn more about how you grow your business, because I think the fact that you moved to a smaller place really impacted how you decided to grow your business. And so we're super excited to hear about that in a few minutes. But before we do that, I know I don't know a lot about landscape architecture. I can barely keep a plant alive. So if you could tell us 3 things that we should know about the landscape architecture business, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, you're not alone. Most people, when I tell them I'm a landscape architect, think that I mow lawns or shovel driveways or drive around in a pickup truck with, shrubs and trees in them and things. But basically, landscape architecture it's the planning and design of exterior public and private spaces. And so that, like you mentioned at the beginning, does cover parks, schools, campuses, resorts, hospitality, urban plazas like memorials, things like that. It's a pretty big, broad profession. It's a mix of horticulture, architecture, engineering, and urban planning would be the best way to describe it.
Great. Moving on to how you grew your business. I love this story. Mike and I were at a wedding earlier this summer, and he was telling me the story, and I knew right then and there that I had to have him tell this story to the Boost Squad. So, Mike, why don't you tell us about what it was like quitting your job in San Diego, moving to Bend, Oregon, and starting your own company where you knew nobody?
Starting from quitting my job and deciding to make the move, I'll say that it was the most nerve-wracking thing that I've ever done. We had a 1.5-year-old kid, little boy, and then my wife got pregnant with our second child and decided she wanted to be closer to her mom, which is here in Bend, Oregon. I think that was like the last day I ever got a full night's sleep, because I remember from that point on, I would just stay up at night, all night, thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? I even remember one night I just couldn't sleep. And at 4 a.m, I got up and just went down to the track and started running around the track, and then went straight into work the next day without sleeping. Yeah, it was a hard few months, but we did it. The idea was we would move here and maybe we would work side jobs, odd jobs, and start the company kind of on the side. But we started looking around for jobs, and I'm a guitar player, to work at the guitar factory or maybe get a bartending job or whatever. And I think for a couple of weeks we tried to maybe find other work, other ways to make a living, make ends meet, and then eventually just said, why waste our time doing that? And why not just go all in on this business? So right around the first of the year, we started the business. It was hard because I had no idea what starting a business meant. I didn't know anything about taxes and calling the Secretary of State and filing for your business license and everything. So it was a lot of work to just even get kind of the basics of what you need to do to become a business. The big issue is I'm a landscape architect and I'm in a small town and I don't know a single person. And so how do you network yourself? And some of the things that, there's a lot of cold calling and there was a lot of kind of elbowing your way into conversations in these networking events. And, I went to a lot of different networking groups and I eventually landed on the Chamber. And because the Chamber of Commerce here in Bend is kind of where more the professional crowd goes, which also is that Leadership Bend program. They run that program. And so I think those two decisions to join those two groups was probably the best thing I did, because that really got me kind of out of the garage, which was where the business was at the time, and out of like my sweatpants and downtown where the action is and where everybody is. So yeah, there was a lot of networking, but not very much of it came to fruition, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a small town and people have their relationships and they don't know anything about you. As much work as you can show them, they can be impressed by it, but they still have their relationships that they've had for 15 years or 30 years or whatever it is. So I would meet with a lot of architects and developers and people, and they would all smile and say, yeah, we really like your work. Maybe we'll work with you in the future. But nothing was really happening. And so it was like that for like 6 months, maybe, which is hard when you have a family with 2 kids at this point, because our daughter was born during that 6 months. So it was pretty nerve wracking. We, blew through our life savings and everything. It even got as bad as I was pulling weeds for a temp agency for like $7 an hour, which was probably the bottom. But, one day I went to a networking event, and I think the story that you're referring to is I had kind of gone through and called every architect that I could find in Bend, which is not very many of them, and it's only like 12 or 15. But I had found this one guy and left him a voicemail maybe 2 or 3 days earlier. But I went to this event, and it turned out that it was a networking event, but it was also like a ribbon cutting grand opening event for a project that he had done. A hotel here in Bend up at Tetherow, which is kind of a really high-end resort. It's like the highest end resort neighborhood in Bend. And there he was getting like flowers, from the owner. Thank you so much. A little speech, the whole ordeal. And I thought, well, that's the guy I called. I got to meet him. But like I said, it was a pretty big event. There was like 300, 400 people there. He was talking to the mayor and the city council members and all these kind of prominent local leaders. And, I couldn't really elbow my way into any of those conversations. So I was just waiting for my opening. And, in the meantime, drinking a few beers to try to get the courage. It's very nerve-wracking to go up to somebody you don't know and just introduce yourself. And especially for me, I'm a little bit introverted. In hindsight, this was a much bigger moment than I thought it was going to be at the time. I was just going to say hi, give them my card. But I was feeling pretty desperate at the time. I wasn't getting any work from anybody. 6 months had gone by. And so I got my beer. I went back. I couldn't find the guy, and he was a pretty noticeable guy. He had a big, like ZZ Top kind of beard and a cowboy hat. And I started panicking, and I ran all over the event. I even ran out in the parking lot to see if I could see his hat kind of bobbing behind the cars anywhere. And I couldn't find him, and I just, I was feeling, like I got a missed opportunity. So I just kind of went back into the event, leaned up against the wall, and started drinking my beer and sulking. And next thing I know, I guess I was leaning up against the wall next to the bathroom, and he came out of the bathroom, and that was him. And he was still holding his flowers and everything. And I was like, hey, Darren Thomas, I'm Mike Szabo. And he said, oh, yeah, Mike, I got a voicemail from you. I've been meaning to call you. It's on my list to do. And so that was it. And I met him right there. And he said, why don't you come in tomorrow? I have 2 projects I want to talk to you about. And so I went in the next day. He gave me 2 projects. And from there, he kept giving me more projects, and the word got around, and I even became kind of Tetherow's onboard landscape architect. If you go to my website, I did their pool and resort rec center. So that was really the defining moment of going from like, we were about to just pack it in, go back to San Diego, ask my old boss for my job back. And after that night, it's kind of gone up from there. I mean, it's been pretty amazing. So that really was the defining moment of the business starting. I guess that's the story you're talking about.
Yeah, that is the story. I mean, Wow. I have so much to say in response to that. That was such an amazing story. I mean, just thinking about the fact that you were picking weeds for $7 an hour and you were just at rock bottom the moment before you met him. You'd spent your life savings to try to make this happen. You were pretty despondent at that point. You figured you missed your chance. And then the guy is standing right there, and it was just a perfect opportunity, and everything changed from that. And I think that is so inspirational, both for me and I think the other listeners, because so much of what happens in life and in business is serendipitous, but it's about kind of making the most of your opportunities. And even though you were at your lowest point, you didn't give up and you kept going. And I think that that's something that a lot of the listeners can really relate to and keep in mind as they're going through their journey of professional and personal growth as well. Some of the other points that you made that I think really resonated with me was you were talking about, when you were making the move out to Bend and you were thinking about how you were going to make ends meet, and you were just staying up all night and worrying, having that anxiety, and then needing to go to the track and run it off. And I know I have had those sleepless nights when I have a lot on my plate and with my business when I'm like, is this going to work or not? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs go through that. It's really interesting that you felt like the need to go running to go burn that excess energy off. I know for myself, I go to SoulCycle a lot, and it's not just a physical release. It's so good for me to just get that energy out and try to regroup.
And I should say that, it's saying a lot because I despise running. I hate it so much. I can't even tell you. So, but it does work.
Yeah, no, it totally does.
Yeah.
And so some of the other things that you touched on, it kind of sounded like this wasn't a grand scheme of yours to go and start a business. You were moving to Bend, but was that your plan when you left San Diego, that you were going to start your own business, or were you going to look for another job for someone else?
Well, it was definitely the plan to eventually start the business, but in no way was it going to be start it right then and make it or break. The whole idea was we'll figure it out for a couple of years, make some contacts, maybe do some moonlighting projects, and then hopefully it would organically grow from there. But the whole we're going to do it and we're just going to go all in, that was not planned out by any means. But, what you were saying before, that it was serendipitous that happened, meeting that guy. And there's been a lot of points in the last 3 years that's happened. And, I think it's very true that you need to just keep pushing and kind of keep going to these events and keep doing all the things that you don't want to do. I remember another time when that happened was Ben does something called First Friday walks, and downtown becomes kind of an open house for all the offices and art studios and all these things. And I had seen on somewhere on the business journal that this architect was having an open house, and it was on a Friday night. And then it turned out it was that Friday when my brother was in town. He was in town. He had been in town for a few days. I think we went whitewater rafting earlier in the day, and we had a few beers, and it was 7 o'clock at night. And, the kids, we were eating dinner with the kids and everything. And the last thing I wanted to do was change into something nice and go downtown and introduce myself to more architects. And I really struggled and was about to not do it. And I finally said, no, I have to do it. I have to do it. This is the whole reason we're here. And so I went downtown and I did it. And I introduced myself to these architects, and same thing. I left, never heard from them, felt like it was a waste of time. But then 2 months later, I got a call from them just asking me if I wanted to sublease a little space in their office. It was kind of out of nowhere. And they said, we also will probably need help on projects too. And they have, by the way, it's the nicest building in all of Bend. It's the coolest design building in Bend. It's exactly where you want to be if you're in the design field. I still wasn't making any money, but I decided to sublease from them. And then just being there, I never got any projects from them, but just being there in that office kind of gave me validation to every one of their clients that walked through the door. And so they would always take my card, and eventually I started getting work from them, not the architect, but the architect's clients and contractors and developers, and then eventually got my own office in this building right next to them. So, every day when I come into this office, which I think is the coolest office in Bend, it's all because that day, rather than just staying home and eating my steak and drinking beer with my brother, I, sucked it up and put on a blazer and went downtown. It's the only reason I'm here. Something comes with everything. Yeah.
So true. I can't tell you how many times in my own business where I have a lot of networking events during the week starting at like 7 p.m. and you've already worked the whole day, you're tired or it's cold outside and you don't want to go, and you just have to force yourself, not because you're necessarily going to get a client out of that event, but you never know when things are going to come full circle. And also sometimes just like who you know is so important. If someone sees that you know somebody else there, then, they might be thinking of you in the future when they're thinking about something. I think that's really the difference between, people that persevere and move forward and those that kind of get complacent once they get kind of lazy and don't make the extra effort to keep building their network and learning more and meeting new people. So what you described, I can totally relate. I think the Boost Squad can as well. One thing I wanted to go back to quickly was when you were talking about how it wasn't your plan to start the business, right when you got to Bend. That is really interesting because I think a lot of would-be entrepreneurs kind of hold back because they're trying to plan and wait for everything to get exactly how it's supposed to be and to be perfect. And that's really never going to happen. I know with my business as well, it wasn't something that I had been thinking about for a really long time. I kind of hit a point where I was just like, you know what, screw it, let's go try it. And it sounds like you kind of got to that point too, where you didn't have another option. And that's so interesting for the Boost Squad to pick up on, because I think a lot of people that start businesses, is not like they put all the building blocks in place and it was just neatly set up for them to go check a box and go do it. Sometimes you're kind of just forced into it. You take the leap of faith, you do it, and you figure it out as you go. I mean, just like you, I had no idea about how to file within my state and set up the LLC or do any of that. And you just figure it out and you learn, and taking that first step is so important.
Yeah, I will just say, thank God we live in the age of Google, because I don't know how I would have done it without the internet and YouTube. And I mean, there's no perfect time and there's no right time for anything. I mean, going back to even my personal life, when's the right time to have kids or get married or, and all those things were on my wife and I's mind when we moved out here was, well, if we don't do it now, because we always knew that we didn't want to stay in San Diego. We wanted to move to a small town and raise our kids in a small town. And it was, so we could either go now while we have a 1-year-old and a baby on the way and we're young and we have energy, or we might get sucked into being in San Diego. Not that there's anything wrong with San Diego. It's a fantastic place. But maybe by the time, 10 years down the road, when we're finally, the time is quote unquote right to leave, we'll be tired. We'll be in our late 40s, 50, starting a landscape architecture company when you're 35 or 34, I guess, is a pretty young time to start an architectural firm. And, most people do it a little later in their career, maybe in their mid 40s. It seems like I said, we just talked about it. Well, we have the energy now. And so let's just go for it and figure it out.
That's awesome. Great. I know that you like to have a lot of fun. I know you work really hard too, but it sounds like, that period in your life was super stressful. You mentioned, getting up in the middle of the night and running, but what did you do kind of once you got to a more steady state and were growing your business? What did you do to take care of yourself and make sure that you had some balance, whether it was working out or just meeting friends and grabbing a few beers? What do you do to keep that balance?
The working out is really helpful. I don't do it as much as I used to or as I should. I think that is probably the best way to relieve stress. But you do have to have some non-work time, as hard as it is being a business owner. I mean, I get up at 4:35 in the morning, work for a couple hours, take a shower, come into work for 9-10 hours, go home, eat dinner with the kids, and then work for like 3 more hours. And it can be a lot. I mean, you have to do it. But you also have to, like you said, carve out time. And for me, that time is, having a beer with friends, going for a walk with my wife. Luckily, we live in Bend. The slopes are only 25 minutes away. You can go skiing for an afternoon or just, take my son to watch the Redskins game at a restaurant. I mean, those things. I used to play in a band, and that was the biggest release, but I can't do that anymore because I'm just too busy. I wish I could. But I don't think it really matters what it is. You just have to get your mind off of work. I mean, the one piece of advice I would say, and a lot of friends that have started businesses have also said the same thing. It's really easy to relieve stress with alcohol, and it does work, but it's very short term. So I would just warn all of the listeners that exercise is a much better way to relieve stress than always trying to drink it off, because it just makes it worse in the morning. So I would just tell people, I mean, you got to do it sometimes, but to not make that your only source of stress relief.
Yes.
It's better to run or go to the gym.
Wow. So you guys don't know this, but I have known Mike since about 6th grade, and you would have never thought in high school or college that he would have been saying, don't drink. So you have come a long way, Mike.
I didn't say don't drink, just don't drink all the time.
Fair enough. Yeah. So let's wrap this up by leaving our guests with a motivational tip that kind of helps you get through the down times or when things are not looking so bright. Give our guests a tip for how you keep going.
That's a good question. I mean, you kind of have to keep going, right? So there really is you just can't stop. But running your own business it's really gratifying because, when you develop relationships with clients and they actually write you checks and it's not just your boss signing your paycheck, that's motivational. In my case and in my industry, the projects keep getting bigger and better, cooler. It feels like we're actually changing the design world a little bit here in Bend, at least the landscape architectural design world, I think. So that's exciting. That keeps me going. But as far as like a little word of wisdom, about a year ago, I stopped at Panda Express for lunch. And for some reason, it was like so crowded there were no seats, which I didn't think happened at Panda Expresses. And so I just sat at this little two-top across from a guy. I just asked if I could sit there because I had no other place to eat. And so we got to talking. He's a total random dude. I told him what I did. And, we talked about opening a business and being successful. And he said to me, being successful takes a lot of hard work and a little luck. But the harder you work, the luckier you seem to get. It really rang true. You work a lot when you're starting a business and being an entrepreneur, but I feel like you have to, and the harder you work and the more you keep pushing, like has been kind of a theme through this discussion. Projects tend to come your way and clients come. And so, yeah, that would be my word of wisdom is just keep pushing, keep working. If it hasn't happened yet, somebody's going to come along and give you a chance and then it'll work. It'll do it. We'll do it. We'll be good.
Good stuff, Mike. Love that. Boost Squad, I hope today's episode inspires you to think more about how you can find your passion and live your best life. For more information, head on over to our website and check out our show notes from this episode and catch the Boost bonus. Mike, I want to thank you for sharing your journey with the Boost Squad today. And remember, guys, anything is possible.
Now that you've completed this episode, the next step is to join the Boost Squad for strategic insights, tips, and tricks, as well as exclusive resources designed specifically to accelerate your personal and professional growth. All this and more is waiting for you at theboostpodcast.com.